Superboy the Legacy fans. This is your Superboy fact checker, Chris Jacobsen. Here with me, as always, is the ever irrepressible Tom Gallagher. Hey, Tom.
Hello.
All right, so folks, as you saw from our last episode, we're doing a multi-part arc. First time we're doing a multi-part.
Yeah, it's kind of a mini series, isn't it?
Yes. It's called Same Story, Three Ways. Okay, and it's basically the Superman or Superboy hits a meteor, loses his memory. Okay, the first time it was done was in the Adventures of Superman with George Reeves back in the 1950s as the episode Panic from the Sky.
Panic in the Sky.
Panic in the Sky. I forget they used Panic from the Sky as the multi-part arc in the Superman comics in the 90s as a throwback. Okay, so Panic in the Sky. And that was done in season 2. It was episode 12, right?
Yeah, something like 12 or 13. It was around there anyway.
Yeah. And then Superboy did it again in their season 3, and it's the episode Superboy Lost.
Yeah, season 3, episode 11.
Yeah. And then Lois and Clark did it in season 1, and that was called All Shook Up. That is a very good version of it, although it has some really, really, really sleazy, creepy moments in it.
We will get to that in the next episode of One Story Three Times. But yeah, today we're talking about Superboy Lost, which is one of my favorite episodes. It's funny, the George Reeves episode is one of my favorite episodes. The same here, and despite some stuff that I don't like in the Lois and Clark one, it is still one of my favorite episodes because it genuinely has some really great stuff in it. So this week we're just going to be picking up right where we left off. We were going to wait a week even to record this, but we were talking and we was like, actually, let's just do it now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a 4-part series. We're also going to talk about the fact that this story, after the George Reeves show, was adapted into the comics, which, you know, TV shows adapt things from the comics all the time. I don't remember many instances of it happening in reverse. Obviously, there's certain characters, like I think Chloe Sullivan from Smallville was in the comics for a very short time. I know that the character of Dreamer from the CW Supergirl series is a character in the comics now. And, you know, I like that character, so that's cool. And
don't forget Livewire.
Livewire was first in the animated series. Harley Quinn was first in the animated series. So yeah, it's really, really cool to see this sort of thing happen.
The design of the Fortress of Solitude. More recently,
they took that straight from the Richard Donner movie. Like that design has endured for a very long time. And you know, Smallville used it too. The Smallville Fortress of Solitude is just the Donner version. But yeah. So Superboy Lost, it's, you know, it's mid-season. You could almost see it as kind of a throwaway episode because it doesn't tie in at all really anything that comes before or after, but it is just a really solid, fun story. And just as we did in the first part of this mini-series we're doing, we will be doing a commentary on it. So if you can pull up your version of Superboy, Season 3, Episode 11, Superboy Lost, I'll count you in as a 3, 2, 1, and just hit play when I say play. 3, 2, 1, play.
And I know what you're about to say. I love that opening sequence.
I say it every time, you know. I do. And thank you for telling me, by the way, that Kal-El's ship in this opening sequence isn't from Superboy. Like, they just nicked it from another show.
Yep.
Because I think that's a fun detail that I didn't know before.
Yeah, like I've said before, you know, it's a sequence of the capsule coming from Mars. So the only thing that they did was they changed the color of the planet behind them. went from red to green. And the show that it came from was called Superforce. It's basically Iron Man on a motorcycle.
Yeah, I've genuinely, I've never heard of that show. So, yeah, I never would have known that had you not told me. And Superboy, unlike Panic in the Sky, just cuts straight to the action. There's no, you see them, reacting to the fact that there's a meteor coming, and you get a little bit of that, and they're watching on a TV screen now, which is obviously a nice update. But yeah, Superboy is one of those shows. It did not waste time. And they're not going for quite a tense story this time. It's more about what happens after he loses his memory. But I don't know. I like the TV trope of characters standing around a TV set, finding out what's going on.
Oh man, Stacy looks so good in that scene.
She looks good in every scene.
Well, we're biased, so
yeah.
The one difference between this and both Panic in the Sky and then All Shook Up is he actually does 100% destroy the meteor here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to go back and try again.
Yeah, Panic in the Sky, he knocks it and it gets into like a stationary orbit. Same thing with All Shook Up. Here, it's gone, it's done. No more meteor.
Which is why it makes so much sense that this time they weren't going for just building tension the entire episode. Because here, the only tension really comes from when you go and you see Lana worried because Superboy's disappeared. They think he might have died.
It's another one written by Michael Maurer.
Yeah.
Directed by Richard J. Lewis.
I think Richard J. Lewis directed quite a few episodes, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he's also he's very much a genre director. I think he was behind a lot of episodes of the 90s remake of The Outer Limits. But I know he was involved in this show a lot. There was a lot of episodes he directed.
That was a nice shot just there, establishing just how worried everyone is. Like, there's just, cigarettes on the desk, just empty wrappers and stuff. They've not even taken the time to go throw them away because they're just... Yeah. When people are really worried about stuff, things like that just happen. I do like this episode a lot. And it's funny, there's an actor in this episode. Every time I see him, I think, man, he looks really familiar and I can't place where he is. So when we get to that point, I'll ask, see if you know.
Is it the guy who's the leader of the cult?
No.
Okay.
He's one of the henchmen.
Okay.
But he has a pretty big moment. We're watching this as a commentary kind of at the moment. We're also talking about the episode in connection with the other memory loss episodes. But there's a scene later on where Clark's got the gun and he's pointing it at the henchman and he's like, he's not going to shoot. I can see it in his eyes. And it's that guy. So when we get there, you'll know.
All right.
It's a very clever idea writing this episode as well, that they have been out here in the woods for so long that she has no idea Superboy even exists. They don't it's not like she can go down the road and get a newspaper. They've been there since just before Superboy made himself public. And
so they've been in there at least 3 years.
Yeah, and it's basically the only way this story would have worked is with something like that. And I thought it's a very clever way of doing it. They're hiding from basically a cult leader that's trying to get them back because the boy is the son of this cult leader. And yeah, it's just a really interesting way to take it, and something I really appreciate them doing.
Yeah.
You know, I always marvel when writers come up with stuff like this because it's the kind of thing that I wish I could come up with. Yeah.
You know, and you know, come to think of it, this isn't the first time that, you know, we've had an episode, you know, in science fiction where, you know, you have a main character loses his memory and there's a meteor involved. I mean, obviously, the first Superman related one is, you know, the Adventures of Superman. But you know, Star Trek did it as well.
Which episode of Star Trek did it?
The Paradise Syndrome.
Right. Huh. It's almost like it's become a trope even outside of its original concept at this point, which is very cool. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that in episode 4 of this series when we talk about the comic and the half connection to Superman the animated series.
Yeah.
One thing I do like in this is that his powers haven't disappeared. He just doesn't know they're there. So stuff like hearing is still happening automatically. But now when he starts to, like in a moment when he starts to fly or anything like that, it comes as a complete shock to him, which is really cool. Like, let's face it, with George Reeves in his episode, the moment he saw that he was strong enough to just destroy that like cabinet thing or like, you know, whatever it was that was next to his armchair.
It was a little armchair table.
That's it. And that was all he needed. He suddenly remembered that he was Superman, basically, in that moment. Whereas Superboy in this, he does quite a few super feats, and he still doesn't remember until he sees the newspaper at the end. I just think that's an interesting way of taking it. This whole episode is just... I like the way that they are still using the previous story, but they're totally putting their own spin on things.
Yeah, and you know, they do the same thing in Lois and Clark's All Shook Up because, you know, I mean, that whole sequence, you know, when Jonathan and Martha are trying to, you know, get him to remember,
and he keeps jumping from the window.
Well,
he keeps falling into the trash can.
Well, no, the first thing is Jonathan hits him from behind with a baseball bat and breaks the baseball bat.
Mm. Well, that would be automatic, but it's funny how even after that, Clark still doesn't quite get his memory back. He concedes that there's something up, but he can't fly. Whereas in this, it almost happens by instinct.
Yeah.
And yet he still doesn't remember. I just think it's interesting. And I like that we keep cutting back to Lana and the rest of the Bureau. Like,
I gotta say, she looks so much better with the shorter hair.
Yeah, it's my favorite haircut for her.
Yeah. Doesn't know his own strength.
And yet it also demonstrates that he's not lost the ability to be gentle because of the way he caught the frog. You know, he didn't want to squish him. It's just he knows he can be gentle, but he just hasn't worked out quite how strong he is when he is going the other way. It's interesting. He's sort of discovering his powers for the first time again in this episode, which is really fun. It's almost like the first time he realizes he's got super strength or super speed, X-ray vision, flight, super hearing, you know, everything.
Yeah, just discovering his powers for the first time all over again. And I mean, his interaction with this woman and with the kid is so great. It does show how great of an actor that Gerard is.
Definitely. And I do wish these characters had come back at some point, you know? Would have been nice to see them in season 4. Maybe they moved to Capital City or something. And that especially would have been fun if they had them move to Capital City and become a friend of Clark Kent, because he would actually have someone in his life other than Ma and Pa who knows his secret. And that would have been an interesting episode, I think, or series of episodes. But
yeah.
Anyway, here we are with the villain, and I've got to say, he's a really creepy villain.
Yeah, he showed up in West of Alpha Centauri.
Right, yeah. It's always hard with Superboy to recognize actors who have been in multiple things, because sometimes I think he looks familiar, and I think, well, maybe it's just because I've watched this episode so many times. It becomes difficult. But yeah, this villain, I do recognize him from West of Alpha Centauri now. But he's really good in this.
Yeah, he has this ability to be really, really creepy.
And what a sadistic thing as well. He's kicking him out of the family, and the way he does that is he cuts an X onto his head. Just you sort of wince just seeing it, even though obviously, I mean, it's fake, obviously, but it's still, the idea behind it is just really awesome. Yeah. If this character and her son had come into season 4, she would have made a really cool alternate love interest. Like, Lana's always chasing Superboy. Maybe it would be nice to actually have Clark in a relationship. Maybe Lana won't understand why Superboy's pulling away.
It would have
good drama.
If they had brought this character back, at least in the first couple of episodes, maybe it would have made more sense why she started spending so much time with Adam Varel.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Change of Heart isn't one of the best episodes. I think as a season opener, it's one of the weaker ones.
That being said, Michael Debar is so great as Adam Varel.
He is. And I like all the stuff with the guy from Lost in Space.
Oh yeah, but the interesting thing, and this is something I think Sam told me a while back, was
this actor here, by the way. Before you say this, that's the actor. I recognize him from something. I can't place it.
Yeah, I recognize him from something. I don't know what it is though.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying about something Sam had said?
Yeah, Sam had told me some time ago that Change of Heart was originally written for Lex Luthor instead of Tommy Puck.
Huh.
Because if you notice, Tommy Puck is a mad scientist who has been given the death penalty, and he's got a female associate running around with him. Gee, who does that sound like from the show?
I'm kind of glad they didn't do Lex Luthor though, because I do like that character. I think there's room for more than one.
Yeah.
You know, and there are so many Lex Luthor episodes in season 4 already.
Yeah, and as I understand it, once they decide, I think they decided to make it Tommy Puck because they realized, hey, gee, we're leaving it open for Lex to reform at the end of this episode. Yeah, that's not a good idea. That takes away.
At least not right then. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when they brought in Bill Mumy, and he did a great job. There's no question about that.
Oh yeah.
And Bill was actually trying to get his longtime friend, Miguel Ferrer, for Adam Varel.
That would have been interesting.
But for whatever reason, he wasn't available at that time. So they got Michael DeBar.
Something I do think is interesting about this cult, though, the members of the cult all seem to be acting like they're strung out on something, like they're on heroin or something like that. It does seem implied that part of the reason he's able to control them is because he's giving them drugs or something. I think that's quite heavy subject matter for what is essentially a family show. I mean, they don't outright say it, but the implication is clear.
Yeah, it's you know, we talked about bringing down the house. You know, we did our commentary on that, and that was overtly done.
Yeah, so they went too far with that one.
Yeah, I mean, even on a family show, you could talk about what they're doing, but if you did it without actually saying it or showing it, it works. So I think that's why they did it this way for this episode, because they realized this is a family show.
Yeah, and the implication is there, like all the cult members, they're all sort of twitchy. That one who didn't want to give the bad news earlier, the one who had the X cut into his head, he's shaking like he's a crack addict or something. Yeah. And it's like, that's not just fear of the cult leader. Like that's someone who's, you know, he's coming down off, you know, he's coming off something. He's in withdrawal. They never outright say it, but yeah, the implication is definitely clear. And I think that is the way to go with it. Yeah, like bringing down the house, like you say. If he'd had that dungeon and it was clear that it was just a torture room, that would have been one thing. But it was very heavily implied that it wasn't just a dungeon, it was a sex dungeon. And that's why it just went a little bit too far. And I do think that episode would have been better if he was just a serial killer. And the only reason he pretended he was into Lana was to get her in, you know, as a victim.
Which technically that's what he was doing anyhow. So
it was just remove the element of sex, and he's way creepier, strangely. Although let's face it, the creepiest serial killers in history always had a sexual component.
And
I do love this moment.
Memory back.
I love that he actually unbuttons the shirt slowly in that moment. He doesn't just rip it open, because it's like he's slowly regaining his memories. I just think that's, you know, I think that's an interesting way of doing it. It is a shame that they're still going to stay in the woods. Like, what? You're okay now? The cult leader's dealt with? You don't have to, you know, live in squalor anymore.
Well,
unless she's just saying, no, we'll leave once we're ready. But yeah, I've always loved that transition. Go past the tree, and he's just completely changed. And this ending is just, you can see how broken up Lana is about it. Brilliant. No words had to be spoken. Just yeah.
show up, and she goes from sadness to happiness in 3 seconds.
Yeah. And just tremendous acting from Stacey as well in that moment. You know.
Yeah. Again, it just shows how great of an actress she is. You know, we've talked about.
That's not a surprise to anyone. She's done some bloody good stuff in recent years. Like, I only watched the first season of True Blood. It just wasn't really my thing. I gave it a chance, but apparently she's in, I think, season 2 or 3. I've never actually seen the season that she's in, but apparently she's really, really good at it. I think she plays a werewolf or something. But yeah, True Blood was, that was a very popular show.
Yeah, and it makes sense that she would not be playing a vampire because she already did that on the short-lived Fox series Kindred the Embraced.
Although that's not to say you can't play a different type of vampire. True Blood was a very interesting show. It's just, I think I started watching season 2, and it was obvious that some of the magic was gone. I think unfortunately that just happens with a bunch of shows. Like The Walking Dead's first season, tremendous. Season 2 starts well, and then it just quickly goes off the rails.
Yeah,
but Stacey's done some amazing work over the years.
Yeah, I mean, this episode is so good. I mean, it takes the trope, the Superman trope of the meteor in space, losing memory, and it puts its own spin on it. Because as you said, the Superboy was known for getting right to the heart of the action quick. Okay.
They knew they didn't have much time, so they had to be just super, super like quick in telling their stories. They had to be very, what's the word? Efficient in their storytelling. And they couldn't afford to waste time. And that's not to say they didn't have episodes where it was all about tension. There are some really great episodes for that. But it was clear that they didn't want to just do a repeat of the George Reeves episode, which was all about tension. Like, they wanted to tell the story in a different way. They wanted to put their spin on it, and I think they really accomplished their task.
Yeah, the way they did that was, focus more on what happens when his memory is gone, where he is while his memory is gone.
I'll tell you what it reminds me of, and it's probably a comic that you've read. There was a Red Kryptonite story, I think in the Silver Age, where he loses his memory and he meets a woman called Sally Selwyn. And
yes,
she falls in love with him, and he doesn't know he's Superman. And at the end of it, he gets his memory back, and he leaves. And I think she only returned for one more story later down the line. And I have her final appearance, but I don't have her first appearance because the difference in price between those two issues is staggering.
Yes.
But really, really cool character. And apparently the only reason they brought Sally Selwyn back is because, and I think this is even written in the letters to the editor section in the back of the comic, the only reason they brought her back is because readers kept saying, we really liked Sally Selwyn. Can she come back, please? She loved Clark for Clark, even though she didn't even know that was his name. Like, she didn't know him at all, and she fell in love with him, whereas Lois only loves Superman. And I think the readers responded to that. But this episode of Superboy really reminds me of the Sally Selwyn story. It's like he loses his memory because of red kryptonite in that. But I do wonder,
to a certain extent, is a meteorite of sorts.
It's a kind of meteorite. You are absolutely correct. I'd be interested to know if the writers of this episode actually had that story in mind at all.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they did.
Because it's right from the era that they kept pulling stuff from. Let's face it, it's right around the era where they had like the Luthor Unleashed story where he loses his hair, I think, because it was Silver Age, and it's right around the time when Bizarro would come in. In fact, the final appearance of Sally Selwyn is an issue that has 3 different stories in it. One which is Sally Selwyn, one which is a Bizarro story, and one which is Mitch's Pitlick. So I kind of feel like the writers of Superboy probably would be aware of it. I'll cut this out, but I'm going to see if I can find it.
Yep.
So this is the issue. I don't know which issue number it is because that's the only part that's missing from the cover of this of this comic. It's just a little bit ripped off. But yeah, Bizarro Invasion of Earth. It's got a brilliant Mixers Pitlick story in it, and it's also the final appearance of Sally Selwyn.
So that's 169 you got there. 165 is
this is 169. Is it only 165 that she was first in?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a sequel to by popular demand. It's the sequel to The Sweethearts of Superman Forgot, for which thousands of readers have been clamoring. It features Sally Selwyn, the one girl who ever loved Clark Kent for himself, and not because he was secretly the Man of Steel.
Yep.
This is a really, really great issue, and if any of the people watching want to go onto eBay and get a copy of this for yourself, you won't regret it, because the Bizarro story, Bizarro Invasion of Earth, is great. The Mixers Pitlick story is great. And you've got the final appearance of Sally Selwyn. This is just all round just a fantastic issue of the comics. And it's, one of my favorites. And I would be really interested to know if the writers of Superboy Lost had read it, because it really does seem like they had.
Well, Mike Carlin was still involved in, the scripting of these episodes. I mean, he still did a few scripts for this season. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he came to Michael Maurer and said, "You remember the episode of Adventures of Superman that the meteor is coming to Earth and he loses his memory?" And Michael would be like, maybe. He says, "I think we should do a version of that for this series, but do it a little differently." He's like, "Okay." And then maybe in collaboration, talking between the two of them, because how much of a plethora of knowledge Mike is as far as DC history.
Oh yeah, there's a reason he was made editor of all the Superman titles. You don't get that job if you don't know what you're doing with regards to the character.
Unless, of course, you work for Marvel and your name is Joe Quesada.
I'm not even going to touch that. But I mean, I've got Superboy Lost pulled up on IMDb, because we always pull up the IMDb just in case there's some interesting trivia. The only trivia listed on this is that it's a remake of Panic in the Sky, and then it also mentions All Shook Up. But obviously, the character in this, the woman who was sort of looking after him when he had his memory lost, is named Marissa, I think it says.
Yeah.
Assuming that that's, the right character. Sarah Essex played Marissa. It would have been nice if they said her name was Sally or something. But maybe if they did that, they would have had to pay the writer of the original story or something.
Yeah, so, or it could have been like a situation like with Metallo from season 2.
Yeah, and I doubt Warner Brothers would really care that much, considering the last appearance of Sally Selwyn was in 1963-64, and they've never brought her up again. So I think they probably could have got away with it, especially if they never said her surname, if they just called her Sally. But
the problem is that, remember, they were only allowed to take from the actual Superboy comic.
I just wouldn't have told them. That's all. I would have just said, "Oh, it's a character called Sally," and I wouldn't have even mentioned. If they work it out later down the line, just be like, "Oh, you got me." That would have been it.
But, it also could have been a situation like maybe they originally wrote her as Sally Selwyn. And
maybe someone did catch it and made him change it.
Or maybe Mike Carlin caught it and was like, we got into a lot of trouble last season with Metallo. You can't do that.
And, and Sally as a character it's a very different story to what actually happened in Superboy Lost. It would have been a completely different sort of Sally Selwyn. But I don't know why it did just remind me of the Sally Selwyn story for some reason. It's a character I liked, and even though she only appeared twice. But it's obvious that at the time the readers really connected with her as well, or they wouldn't have brought her back for that second appearance.
Right.
Like I showed, back by popular demand, the readers were, kept asking them on it. So literally just a few months, like a few issues later,
4 issues later, they bring her back.
Yeah, it's by popular demand.
How much clamoring could people have been doing back in the 60s like that?
I mean, they had. I'm assuming that at this point in time, like the Metropolis mailbag was a thing. I'm guessing if I open this up, they will have reader mail at the back.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they just got a ton of letters about it. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually gonna quickly have a look just in case there's anything about it. If they do have letters from the readership, it's not at the back of this issue for some reason. Maybe this is before they started doing that.
No, they were doing letters at that time. Maybe sometimes it was at the back of the book. Sometimes it was in the middle of the book. Depends on where they could find the space.
Yeah, the back of this book is just, do you want to train to be a spaceman? One thing I always love about old comics is the adverts. Like, I want a pair of those X-ray glasses that clearly don't work.
Or a bag of sea monkeys.
You can still get sea monkeys.
Really?
I might buy. I might buy some sea monkeys, and I'll put them on the shelf next to me and have it displayed. My cat will probably try and eat them. Might not be a good idea to have little fishy things floating in water anywhere in this house. I'll wake up one morning and the cat will have eaten the whole lot of them.
Yeah, Dave is a little...
He's a hunter, that boy.
Well, it's in his nature, so.
Absolutely. But, Superboy Lost. We're going off track a bit. Let's bring it back to Superboy Lost. So you recognise that actor too, but you can't place it either.
I can't place him. The only one that I can place is the cult leader, and he was the leader of the one tribe on the ship in west of Alpha Centauri, which was the next year. I'm sure he made appearances in previous episodes of Superboy, but I can't for the life of me place it. And the one guy that you were talking about, I know the face. I just don't know where I know the face from other than here.
Yeah. And, IMDb isn't complete for this episode because there are definitely more characters in this episode than are listed in the credits on IMDb. I don't know if that's just because the actor didn't want Superboy on his resume. I don't know. But then again, there are a bunch of actors listed in this episode who just don't have photographs attached to their faces.
Right. So for all we know, that one of those actors that doesn't have a face attached is the one
could actually be our guy. Yeah. But it's hard to tell because I think some of them have names on IMDb, but I don't remember their names in the episode particularly. Yeah. They're just, cult members.
Yeah. I gotta one thing I gotta say about this episode. Even though the meteorite looks very cheap.
Yeah. The explosion looks pretty good though.
The explosion looks great, and it does. And I'm not taking away anything from Panic in the Sky, but it does look a lot better than the effect we had for the meteorite in that.
The meteorite in that, one thing I did prefer about the Panic in the Sky one is the fact that the meteor looks like it's sort of bristling with energy. Like you can see, like it almost looks like it's a chunk of like molten magma. Like some parts are cooler than others, but other parts it's almost glowy in places.
Almost like that. It could be kryptonite.
Like it could be kryptonite, and obviously that's something that the scientists at the observatory at the beginning of that episode pointed out before Superman went, to stop it. But yeah, the meteorite in this, it basically just looks the same as the rock from Mindscape. It was probably made by Alan Duckworth, who made the rock in Mindscape. Alan, if you're watching, let us know. Did you make the meteor? Like, it almost looks like it could be the same rock. It may well be. That would be funny if it is just a
Well,
reused prop.
Mindscape was just the episode right before, so it's a good chance that it was.
Yeah, it may well have been. Uh, Alan, if you're watching, if you want to confirm that for us, we'll love you forever.
Well, we already do, but that's
well, we already do. We already do. But we always appreciate when people clear these things up for us because, like I say, there's the only trivia on the IMDb page is that it's a remake of Panic in the Sky. But you're right. The fact the Meteor does look slightly more like it's a meteor. The fact that you can't see the string holding it up is a huge plus. It's almost a shame, when they made the DVD, it's a shame they didn't just erase the strings every now and then. I wouldn't have minded them doing that.
It's just a you have to look at it as that there was like 30 plus years between Panic in the Sky and Superboy Lost.
It's amazing that the difference in quality isn't a lot bigger, really. Superboy's version, it looks almost like a color version of that, except the Meteor's not got the glowy little bits and stuff like that show that it might be sort of, there's something odd about it. But yeah, it totally works. And the explosion looks better. Obviously in Panic in the Sky, the explosion just cuts to it's a cartoon explosion, which they did a fair bit in that show. I think they're taking after Kirk Allen, where when he would fly, he would turn into an animated Superman, which is an effect that I still think is fucking awesome. I love that because they actually had the chance where he could actually fly high into the sky above the city, and I really appreciate that. I think it still looks pretty good.
Yeah,
but, what's happening. It's not fooling you at any moment, but you don't care because it just looks cool. But
this I think this is kind of an underrated episode of the series. Mostly
it's
because
one of my favorites.
One of mine too. But I think it's underrated because it just for the simple fact that anybody who's a Superman fan at that time who had seen the original George Reeves episode would have said, "Oh, this is just a remake of that. This is just a remake of that," and that's very derisive. Yes, there are certain elements that are a remake. Okay, the Meteor, the memory loss, but it's how it's presented that makes it better. Things become tropes because they're used often, but it's how you take that trope and adapt it.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, sure. When they were making this episode, they could have done a panel for panel remake, of the original episode.
Or even the comic that adapted it. They could have said, right, well, they made this episode for George Reeves and then the comic adapted that. Maybe we should in turn adapt the comic.
Yeah.
That would have been perfectly acceptable. But they decided to do something kind of original with it. They put their own spin on things. And I will always respect that decision. I think it was the right call. And Lois and Clark, we're going to do Lois and Clark as well. I think they did the same thing and it works because of it. It would have been boring if they just did the exact same thing again, even though the original episode was, a classic.
Yeah, it's if they had just redone the episode, shot for shots, line for line, moment for moment, then all it really would be the 90s remake of Psycho with Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
And while it's not a bad movie, that remake.
No. It's just, what's the point?
Yeah, it's just,
you might as well just take the original and pay to have it colorized.
And re-release it. You know.
And let's face it, Psycho just looks better in black and white.
Yeah, it's just what we were talking about before. With Panic in the Sky, black and white makes things look better when you're talking about tension.
Like Panic in the Sky is just a gorgeous episode to look at. Like I don't know, some people don't like black and white, but I'm a fan of it, and I think Panic in the Sky looks genuinely awesome. just because I like the style. And I doubt there's anyone that could watch that episode and say this looks ugly. You know?
Yeah. Well, remember, Tom, you and I both have a fondness for black and white, considering our first TVs were black and white TVs.
But I mean, modern TV shows, you'd be amazed how often they will do like a black and white episode. I know the first series, the first season of The Walking Dead, I know that they actually on the Blu-ray gave you the option to watch it in black and white like the original comics.
Yes.
Zack Snyder's Justice League has a black and white version. I don't know why you would want to watch it in black and white, considering it wasn't actually shot in black and white, so it's a post-conversion. Which, they did a lot of work on it, to be fair to them, but I don't know who that's for, except maybe the director's ego.
Well, let's face it, Zack Snyder has a huge ego.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not going to get into that.
No. But I think that's all I've really got to say on Superboy Lost. I mean, I'm kind of excited to get to Lois and Clark's All Shook Up. I'm tempted just to do that now, to be honest.
You want to do it? Well, I'll be very happy.
If you're up for it, we'll do all 4 parts in one day and just release them over the next month.
Yeah, I just have to go grab my DVD.
Cool. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to tune in again next week for part 3 of the same story 3 times. Goodbye. Oh, be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave us a comment, all that stuff. We read the comments. We respond to the comments. And since we're doing these as sort of a half commentary, half podcast, if you have an idea for something you would like to see us do in a similar sort of format, leave it in the comments. And, we always try to do anything that we're requested to do. So thanks again.
Yep.
Goodbye.